I don't feel like you can heal in the same environment that made you sick. So it's
Yeah.
like, even if you can't physically relocate, which it sounds like all of us have in some way, you still have to change the environment in some way.
Happy Sober Day, friends. Welcome to the Sobriety Diaries. My name is Nate. I am a grateful recovering alcoholic, 7 years from my last drink. The Sobriety Diaries is a video podcast where we share powerful stories of recovery told by those who lived them. Check us out at thesobrietydiaries.com for all things podcast related. And for all our video interviews, head over to youtube.com/Nate Kelly. Also, please share this podcast with just one person in your life who may still be struggling. You just never know what they may need to hear today. Recovery is possible. So we are reintroducing our recovery roundtable approach to this episode. It's our first recovery roundtable of season 3. And I invited 2 of my favorite guests back to chat about this idea that I had about saying goodbye to or grieving our former selves and that lifestyle and all of the things that came along with it. And for me personally, it was definitely a grieving process. You know, I talked to a few of my guests about grieving different things in recovery, the loss of a loved one or a job or different things as life comes at us, but dealing with them in recovery and using the tools that we learn in recovery. But for me, there was definitely a grieving of alcohol in general. You know, this was my best friend for 2 decades, and the thing or the person that I went to when I was sad or happy or all of these different emotions and life events, alcohol was always there. Alcohol was always involved. So I felt like it was grieving the death of a best friend. And that was something that I wasn't really prepared to deal with or expected to happen. I thought sobriety was, you quit drinking and you move on with your life. And I started to learn quickly that it was all of these different emotions and about how to live a better life. So the grieving started for me fairly quickly on, in detox. It was this immense sadness and this thought of, what kind of person will I be? Alcohol and like this party personality was also a big part of who I was and how my friends like identified me. Like Nate is, the party person. He's the one that always shows up with the booze. He's, was a big part of my personality. So it was learning how to navigate life without that as well. So I guess let's start with kind of opening up the floor. Andi, did you have a similar sense of grief or this, transition to really a new version of yourself?
Yeah, so listening to your experience with it makes me think that possibly everyone's period of time when they grieve, if they grieve during this process, is different depending on the circumstances of how they got sober. So like for you, going into an actual detox center, the circumstances surrounding when you got sober may have brought the grieving period on then for you specifically. But for me, because of how I got sober, I only planned on being sober for a short period of time, right? So for me, it was like there was always that, well, eventually I will get back to it, right?
Right.
But what happened was, as time went on and I started doing the work and I started, feeling all the great feeling, I was like kind of riding this high. So for me, it was actually different. I was stoked at the beginning because I
Yeah.
was feeling so good. And every day since then, for the last 5 years, has been a conscious decision not to drink, right? So for me, the grievings didn't so much happen more at the beginning. For me, I think that even here now, 5 years later, it comes in waves. It comes in very odd times. Like, for example, I was just last night watching like a Netflix reality show, right? And like, I mean, you know how it is in entertainment and media. It's like everybody's always drinking,
Just
right? It's
bombarded
like,
with it.
yeah, and it was like a dating reality show. So it's like they're all going on dates, they're all having drinks, and I'm currently single, and so I'm putting
Yeah.
myself in that mindset of like, oh, like I'm gonna have to date, and like it's gonna be so hard to find someone that's like on the same wavelength, and like, what's, just kind of going through and playing through all those mental scenarios when I'm uh like when it's exposed to me in different ways, whether it's through the media or just being out and seeing other people drinking. It's like I just kind of, it comes in waves is like my best answer.
Yeah.
Like I'll be totally fine, and then it'll be exposed to me or brought up in some context, and I'll be like, oh damn, like I am different. Like my life is different. Like
Yeah.
my reality is different than those people, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You and I have sort of talked about this offline as well, but both being single and like
Mm-hmm.
reacclimating ourselves to like dating life. And I think bars and
Mm-hmm.
grabbing a drink and, all of these things that we've normalized as part of a date
Mm-hmm.
or, getting to know someone is tough.
Yeah.
And, it's not like a prerequisite, I guess, for me to find a partner who is like completely sober. They have to, of course, respect sobriety and respect my recovery and, not be at the bars every night. But I'm not against dating someone who is not stone sober. So it's also something to consider like what other things, can we be compatible with? But just that dating thing is another thing that
Yeah, whole other
is
Another episode.
subject. Yeah,
another
exactly.
episode, right? Mike, what about you? I know there was more of a long-term recovery, I guess, process for you being in the sober living house. So, what are your thoughts on the grieving topic?
Well, I think it was a longer term recovery process in general, too. I mean, I was trying to think back to the different phases of different times that I got sober. To be honest, the last time I got sober back in 2017, this new sobriety, it wasn't, I don't think I grieved a whole lot because my life was a complete and utter disaster when I came back. Like
Yeah,
I had literally almost nothing left, like a little duffel bag with some clothes. And I mean, I had burned all the bridges, and I was pretty willing to do whatever it took. Now, I think when I was younger, all these things applied to me where my identity was wrapped up in the drinking, and I
yeah,
was the guy at the parties with the booze and the drugs, and where it was like fun, but fun with problems at that point. And I had completely burned everything to the ground. And it's hard, friends that I had, even family members that I had, it's like, what's this relationship going to look like minus the drinking? Like, how
yeah,
are we going to go golfing without a case of beer? And are we
right.
still going to, whatever, all these things that you used to do. um but I think the last time maybe grieving or romanticizing came into the picture later. So I would have time and I'd be in Venice, California, and I'd be driving down the road and I would see a motel that I used to stay at. And I had this thing where, man, wasn't life easier when you just didn't have a job and shot dope
Yeah,
all day, and that was your only concern, And it's like, whoa, like it wasn't. It was definitely not easier,
bring
but
it
there's
back. Yeah,
right. But there's this thing where it's just like I'll look at these places and the memories will come back, and I was like, kind of like those were the days, and I'm like, that lasts for about 2 seconds, right?
right. I've had
Um,
those thoughts though, where it's like, damn, all of these. And I texted Andy yesterday, adulting blows. Like sometimes where it's like, I wish that I didn't have all these responsibilities. And like, I've had those thoughts before too. Like, man, wouldn't it be nice just to like not give a fuck, turn my phone off, stop interacting with people, not going to work, getting, a case of wine. And then it's like, okay, let's play that tape forward.
Right.
What is all the shit that comes along with that as
Sure.
well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy the pull that it still has, and it doesn't come up for me a lot. And I would say, especially now the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas, and
Yeah.
driving by a bar with some cool lights on the outside and it's kind of dim on the inside. And it's probably cozy and warm in there.
Yeah.
Everyone, and you just imagine everyone's
Speaking my
just,
language.
I know.
I can paint a
Yes.
good picture. And everyone's just having the time of their lives, but it's not true. And that's what it might look good on the outside still, but I've just my own experience and your guys' experience and the experience of people that I work with, just the utter uh, sadness and devastation that like alcoholism brings is just that's the reality of it for a lot of people, not
Right.
for everybody, but for a lot.
Have you guys been able to maintain relationships, the important ones, with people that perhaps maybe you identified only as like a party friend, or like your only common interest was drugs or alcohol? Have you been able to, if you wanted to, maintain those relationships?
I definitely can't think of a single person that's still in my life that I used to. I mean, when I think of me at my worst, 100% not. Like, there's no way, because those people are still doing the things
Right.
that I was
Right.
doing. Um, Also, there's like a literal spatial difference. Like, I moved, I had to remove myself. Like, I
That's
moved
important. Sometimes you
across
have
the
to.
country.
Yeah.
Yeah. Completely, uprooted my life and changed. And so what's interesting is like my experience when I first got sober and then started talking about my sobriety was the few people that were still around during that time uh, got very triggered. So like people that I actually at that time would have been okay with keeping them in my life, right? Because they weren't directly like affecting me in any negative way. They got really, really triggered and actually removed me from their life. So like I was the problem. And so they kind of like exited on their own. I didn't have to really do anything for it. And of course, looking back now, it's like those relationships and those friendships were not based on anything real, right? In
Right.
my opinion, it was years of trauma bonding, and we were just trying to hold something together because of history, because it had been so many years, but it doesn't
Right.
mean that it was actually like built on anything real. So I was a little upset at the beginning just because I felt like I'm doing this thing that's so great for me. Like I'm again, I was riding a high at the beginning. So it was like, I feel great. I want to be good to people. I want people to be good to me. So then to be treated that way felt, I mean, it definitely hurt. But as I've had time to process it, this last 5 years, I'm like, oh my gosh, like what friendship would we even had? Like if they
Yes.
had stuck around, right? Like I'm so on a different wavelength now. And thankfully, for the most part, I'm trying to think everyone that I'm really close to now, I don't really know that they ever even knew me when I used to drink. So it's nice because there's nothing for them to compare. I love that they don't have that to
Yeah.
compare it to,
Same.
right? They only have the me now, where I've been able to like be of conscious mind and like treat people well. Whereas before, like I would have treated people like garbage. So I'm glad they don't know me in that way.
Exactly.
You know what I
Yeah. That
mean?
was like almost, I look back and feel like it was almost like a character or like a
Oh
different
yeah.
version of myself. It was this person or thing that I was portraying, fueled by drugs and alcohol,
Totally.
that was like this version of myself that I am not anymore, thankfully.
Mhm.
And yeah, to your point, it's like, would we even have, would we even want to be in the same room with one another?
Right.
And
Yeah.
in a lot of cases, the answer is no. So, with the exception of immediate family and, removed themselves in one way or the other over the years, which I'm okay
Yeah.
with.
I will say there are a couple people who were involved in my life again at my worst, but they weren't people who were actively in addiction with me. They were like almost like the bystanders that were like that loved me and cared about me so much and wanted me to get my shit together. And so I'm so thankful that they've forgiven me because I put them through a lot, like
Yeah.
especially
Right.
during that time. And to know that we're still friends and we know some of us are now parents and we can check in on each other and we're just so far past that. Like for me, it just means so much to me because I know what I've done. Like, I know the horrible person that I was in my past. So for them to never shame me or make me feel bad about that, and if anything, like celebrate where I am now, it's been really cool to like have those people still in my life because they have seen the journey. And so they know, like they know what I've been through and they know what happened. And so for them to see me now just like feels really good. You know, almost like I'm glad I can like almost make them proud maybe in some way, or like they can just know that, yeah, she did finally get her shit together after they wanted me to for so long, you know?
And it kind of strengthens that relationship even more so, right?
Right.
I love that.